As you know, my mother's journey began in her own home. 8 brothers and sisters, one of whom turned out to be a president of the United States, 2 of whom turned out to be senators, sisters who were enormously accomplished, and yet one sister, Rosemary, who was different. And the challenge of understanding Rosemary's life, I think, changed everything. It was only when I got to be older that I understood how vexing that must have been for my mother, her siblings, and her parents. Because how could you live as they lived, so competitively, so voraciously, so determined to be out in the public eye, to be capturing power, to be making a difference in a large way, and yet still recognize Rosemary's value, and still realize that someone who had significant challenges, who after her childhood, after attempted surgeries to help her, had only the most limited verbal ability and only the most limited motor ability. How could you balance those two and value both? I came to understand that Rosemary presented an enormously compelling vision for my mother and for her siblings and for me, because she was the only person in my family system who I ever met who didn't need to do anything to prove that they had value. She didn't need to be elected. She didn't need to be successful. She didn't need to be a bank president to prove value. She changed the value equation in that family. She had value to start. When she came in the room, no one questioned what she'd done that day. We were all just happy to see her. No one challenged her to say, "What have you done today?" It's not that they didn't have expectations. It was rather that the expectations had a much clearer starting point. Value and dignity were hers to begin with. She didn't have to earn those. She started with them. That set my mother, that experience of growing up and seeing her own mother frustrated, seeing her own sister excluded, set her off on a lifetime journey. And by 1961, that journey had taken her from institutions, from giving small grants to scholars, to therapists, to coaches, I think to the point of fury. She started out with frustration. She could remember her mother saying, "What about Rosemary?" and hanging up the phone, hearing no school, no doctor, no sailing program, no coaching program, no place for Rosemary. What about Rosemary? And then fury in her own life at seeing that as an adult, seeing no one who cared. And then finally, through some strange combination, she decided that the course of action in her life was going to be convert that fury into fun. And so she started a camp. And all she did was decide that those children who were living in institutions in Washington, D.C. and in Rockville, Maryland, where we grew up, that they were sitting in those institutions locked behind those bars, those horrific scenes which we all know and have seen from our past, that they should have a chance to come out and play kickball. Why not? Maybe a chance to swim or ride a pony. Isn't that what most children do in the summer? Why not them? And here we had the grace and blessing to live on a huge piece of land way out in suburban Maryland, and she decided that that land would become a camp, and that was Camp Shriver, and that's how Camp Shriver was born. Bring the school buses here. If no one else will take them, let them come here. Nothing more than the desire to play. Simple. Simple actions, simple change. I can remember those days. I was a small child, 5 or 6 years old. I can remember wondering, looking out my window, I could remember those school buses, they'd pull up, and the campers, as we called them, would all come out, and they'd gather around the flagpole, and the trumpet would play, and everybody would be silent, and the flag would be raised. And I can remember looking out my window and trying to understand what this was all about. Who were these people? Where did they come from? Why did they have to come here? Where was the support for them? Why was my mother so interested in them? Why was this moment so solemn? Everybody was quiet as the flag was raised. And then, people would jump around and form a circle and sing "If You're Happy and You Know It." Don't worry, I'm not going to sing. I know you've had enough singing for the day, not for me, and believe me, you wouldn't want to hear me. But I can remember, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. And I think to myself, wow, what a challenge that must have been to me as a child, to figure out what does that mean if you're happy and you know it. How do you know? How do you know if you're happy? Who were they? Were they happy? So those questions infused my life. They stayed with me throughout my childhood and adulthood. And of course, as you all know, that camp turned into a big event in Chicago that Marty went in and claimed not just the mantle of camper, not just the mantle of athlete, but the mantle of Olympic, human greatness. There was this great moment to say, no, not just camper, not just runner, not just marathoner, great. A different definition of great. The Olympic definition, Citius, Altius, Fortius, fastest, strongest, biggest, greatest. No, not our definition. Greatness of the spirit, greatness of courage, greatness of inner gifts, greatness of perseverance. That was the definition that Marty claimed in Soldier Field. Greatness is about what you bring to the table. Greatness is about the gifts you have within you. And that movement today, 3.5, almost 3.2 million athletes, people don't realize. Biggest country in Special Olympics today is China. Next biggest, United States. Soon, though, India will be bigger. Soon, Russia will be as big as the United States in terms of the number of athletes, the number of coaches, the number of volunteers, all from the bottom up, answering the call. Will you give a person with a developmental disability the chance? Will you open the door to opportunity? Will you create chances to run that race, to ride that horse, to swim in that pool, to overcome whatever obstacle you think exists in your mind, whatever obstacle the world is putting on you? Will you welcome the chance for these campers, for these athletes, for these Olympic greats to prove what they can do? Now, it's a wonderful story, except it has an unpleasant side. In 1995, for the first time, we had World Games in Connecticut, and for the first time, we included in those games a health screening tent. So you'd come down to Olympic Town, and there was a place you could learn to sail a boat, and there were people doing demonstrations of games and activities and giveaways and grab bags, and then there was a health screening tent, and we had dentists and optometrists in there, and they were giving away toothbrushes and toothpaste and showing you how to brush and floss and helping you check your eyes and put drops in, and it was wonderful. Everybody's having a great time, and then at the end of the games, they came and said to me, would you like to see the results of the screenings we did in the tents? I said, sure. So here's what we found. 85% of the athletes screened had refractive errors. 28% had astigmatism. 25% strabismus. 29% had untreated visual problems. 27% had not seen a doctor within 3 years. 68% had gingivitis. 20% reported pain in the oral cavity. 15% of the athletes screened randomly. Now, remember, these are athletes who have traveled from all over the world. They have accessed social systems. They have strong and committed caregivers. They are, in a way, people who have done the best you could ever hope for at accessing care. 15% went to the emergency room from the tents because they had such acute disease in the oral cavity and such sharp pain. Untreated, undiagnosed pain that warranted emergency room care. We couldn't provide the care on site. 15%. I was stunned. I have to tell you, I was shocked, as was everyone else who was involved in the screening. And so we thought to ourselves, if it's that bad for those athletes, how bad could it be for the 170 million, 200 million who are not yet involved? And we went to look at the data, and we couldn't find anything. Any of you who know data systems on healthcare for this population, you'll know the data is almost non-existent.